Imagine this. You wake up on a Saturday morning, walk into your own cafe, smell fresh coffee, see people sitting at your tables, laptops open, music playing in the background, and every few minutes, someone walks up and buys something. It looks like the perfect business, right? You get to build a brand, create a cool space, serve great coffee, and maybe eventually have a business that runs without you standing behind the counter every single day. But here's the part most people don't see. The money doesn't come from the coffee alone. And in 2026, opening a cafe in America is a very different financial decision than it was a few years ago. Because before you sign a lease, buy an espresso machine, or spend thousands of dollars making the place look beautiful, you need to understand one simple question. Can this cafe actually make enough money to justify the risk? Today, we're going to break down the real economics of owning a cafe: startup costs, rent, labor, pricing, margins, daily sales, break-even, and the biggest mistakes new cafe owners make. And by the end, you'll have a much clearer idea of what you're actually signing up for. Let's start with the obvious. A cafe can be a great business, but a great cafe is not automatically a profitable cafe. That's an important distinction. You can have amazing coffee, beautiful interior, hundreds of Instagram followers, a line outside the door, and still lose money. Why? Because revenue is only the beginning. Let's say your cafe does $40,000 in sales in 1 month. That sounds pretty good, right? But that $40,000 isn't your income. First, you have to pay for coffee beans, milk, syrups, food, cups, packaging, payroll, rent, utilities, insurance, software, repairs, marketing, credit card processing fees, taxes, and a whole list of expenses customers never see. So when someone spends $7 at your counter, you don't get to keep $7. That's the first mindset shift you need to make. You're not buying yourself a job. You're building a business that has to produce enough cash after every expense to reward you for the money and time you've invested. And that's where the real challenge begins, because cafes usually operate on relatively tight margins. Let's say you're thinking about opening a small neighborhood cafe in the United States. Maybe 1,200 to 1,800 square feet. A modest seating area, a commercial espresso machine, grinders, refrigeration, ovens, or food prep equipment, POS systems, furniture, signage, inventory, and enough cash to survive the first few months. The first mistake is thinking, I just need enough money to open the doors. No, you need enough money to open the doors and survive after opening them. Because your first month might not look anything like your fifth year. You could spend $150,000 getting the cafe ready, and then discover you need another $50,000 or $75,000 in working capital just to keep the business comfortable while sales build. Depending on the location, condition of the space, equipment, build-out requirements, concept, and size, startup costs can vary dramatically. A simple second-generation cafe space might be much cheaper to open than an empty commercial space that needs major construction. And that's why there isn't one magic number. But as a potential owner, you should think about startup capital in 3 buckets. First, the cost of getting the space ready. Second, the cost of equipment and inventory. And third, the cash reserve that keeps the business alive while you're building demand. That third bucket is the one beginners often underestimate. Now let's talk about one of the biggest expenses: rent. This is where location becomes a double-edged sword. You want a location with lots of people, but those locations usually cost more. A busy downtown corner might bring thousands of potential customers. But if the rent is so high that your cafe needs an unrealistic number of customers every day just to survive, you haven't bought a great location. You've bought an expensive problem. Think about it this way. Imagine your total occupancy cost is $8,000 a month. That's before paying your employees, buying coffee, or paying yourself. Your cafe has to generate that money every single month, whether it's raining, snowing, slow season, or the espresso machine suddenly decides to ruin your morning. And that's why experienced operators don't simply ask, how many people walk past this location? They ask, how many of those people will actually buy from me? Foot traffic is not revenue. Conversion is revenue. Now let's talk about pricing. Suppose your average customer spends $6. That sounds pretty healthy. But let's say you want to generate $40,000 per month. Divide $40,000 by $6. And you're looking at roughly 6,667 transactions per month. That's about 222 transactions per day if you're open every day. Now imagine your average ticket isn't $6. Maybe it's $8 because customers add a pastry, breakfast item, or another drink. Suddenly, the math looks much better. At an $8 average ticket, $40,000 in monthly sales requires about 5,000 transactions per month, or roughly 167 transactions per day. That's a huge difference. And this is why average ticket size matters so much. You don't always need dramatically more customers. Sometimes you need to make each existing customer slightly more valuable. A latte plus a pastry, a sandwich plus a drink, a larger size, an extra shot, a seasonal special, a loyalty program that encourages another visit. Small changes can have a meaningful effect when they happen thousands of times a month. But there's a catch. You can't just keep raising prices. Customers have limits. And in 2026, consumers are paying close attention to what they get for their money. So your pricing has to make sense for your market. Now we get to one of the biggest expenses in the entire business. Labor. A cafe is different from a digital business. You can't automate everything. Someone has to open the store. Someone has to prepare drinks. Someone has to handle food. Someone has to clean. Someone has to restock. Someone has to deal with customers. Someone has to close the store. And if your cafe is open from early morning until evening, you need coverage across multiple shifts. This means payroll can become a major expense very quickly. And here's another problem. You might think, I'll just work there myself and save money. And yes, you can reduce payroll. But you're not actually making that labor free. You're paying for it with your time. If you're working 60 hours a week behind the counter, handling employees, ordering inventory, fixing problems, answering messages, and doing bookkeeping, you don't own a business yet. You own a job. The goal is eventually to build a system where the cafe can operate consistently without your physical presence every minute of every day. That's much harder, but that's also where the business becomes more valuable. Now let's make this practical. Imagine your cafe has $12,000 in monthly fixed expenses. That includes things like rent, insurance, software, certain salaries, and other overhead. Then let's say your gross margin after direct product costs is around 70%. If you sell $1 of product, approximately 70 cents remains to help cover those fixed expenses. To cover $12,000 in fixed expenses, you'd need roughly $17,143 in monthly sales just to reach operating break-even under those simplified assumptions. And that's before considering things like debt payments, taxes, owner compensation, unexpected repairs, or other costs that may apply. This is why you need to know your numbers before opening, not after. Because your real question isn't, can I make $30,000 a month? Your real question is, how much revenue do I need every month before this business actually starts generating meaningful profit? That's the number that matters. And then there are the expenses nobody puts on the Instagram post. Your commercial refrigerator breaks. Your espresso machine needs maintenance. A grinder needs repair. A credit card processor takes its percentage. Food gets wasted. Employees call out. You accidentally order too much inventory. Your landlord increases rent. Your insurance premium changes. A slow month hits. And suddenly, that beautiful spreadsheet you made before opening doesn't look so beautiful anymore. This is why cash reserves are so important. A profitable business can still run out of cash. Think about that for a second. You can technically be profitable over the year and still have a month where you don't have enough cash to comfortably pay every bill. That's why cash flow matters just as much as profit. So what does a smart cafe owner actually focus on? Not just the coffee. They watch the numbers. They know their average ticket. They know transactions per day. They know their food and beverage costs. They know labor as a percentage of sales. They know occupancy costs. They know which products are profitable. They know which products look popular but barely make money. And they know when the business is busy and when it's actually profitable. Because those aren't always the same thing. Imagine your cafe is packed from 8 to 10 in the morning. It looks amazing. But if you're understaffed, wasting ingredients, giving away discounts, and selling products with weak margins, being busy doesn't automatically mean you're winning. The best operators turn customer demand into profitable demand. Now here's the interesting part. The cafe industry isn't just about selling coffee anymore. The strongest concepts are often selling an experience. A place to work. A place to meet friends. A place to have breakfast. A place to study. A place to grab something quickly on the way to work. A place people actually want to come back to. And that's important because your biggest asset may not be the espresso machine. It might be your repeat customer base. If someone spends $8 with you once, that's one transaction. But if they spend $8 3 times a week, that's a completely different customer. At roughly 150 visits a year, an $8 average ticket represents around $1,200 in annual revenue from one customer. Now imagine doing that with hundreds of loyal customers. That's when the economics start getting interesting. So, after all of this, should you open one? Maybe. But don't start with the question, wouldn't it be cool to own a cafe? Start with, can I build a cafe that makes financial sense? Before signing a lease, build the model. Estimate your startup cost. Estimate your monthly fixed expenses. Estimate your labor. Estimate your product costs. Estimate your average ticket. Estimate realistic daily transactions. Then calculate your break-even point. And here's the important part. Don't build your business plan around your best-case scenario. Build it around a reasonable scenario. Then stress test it. What happens if sales are 20% lower than expected? What happens if labor costs more? What happens if your opening gets delayed? What happens if your espresso machine needs a major repair? What happens if the first 6 months are slower than you expected? If the business still survives? Now you're thinking like an owner. Because owning a cafe isn't really about selling coffee. It's about managing people, costs, pricing, cash flow, customer experience, and risk every single day. And if you can do that well, a cafe can become much more than a beautiful place with good coffee. It can become a real business. So before you fall in love with the location, the logo, the furniture, or that beautiful espresso machine, fall in love with the numbers first. Because the best cafe isn't necessarily the one with the coolest interior. It's the one where the economics work. And if you want to build a business that actually makes money, that's the part you can't afford to ignore. If you found this video useful, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications, because we're going to keep breaking down the real numbers behind the businesses people dream about owning. And remember, don't just build a business that looks successful. Build one that actually is.